There's no play in that.
That's fine. It just means we got to get it right.
I typically do. So what we've done so far is we've gotten the Monster Moto 80 disassembled to the point where we can mount and put in the Predator 212. We've taken the Predator 212 engine, we've removed the governor and removed the oil sensor, put that back together. We've installed a Stage 1 performance kit from Go Power Sports. What else, Forrest? That's about all. That's about what we've done, right?
That's about what we've done.
All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and mount this bad boy, or start the assembly process of mounting this into the frame. First things first is we're going to need to remove. You want to stick it in here? Can you stick it in here where I can see that front? Will it turn? Okay, so we're going to want to remove this front oil plug. What size is that?
10 millimeter in again.
We're going to go ahead and remove that. You ready?
I'm going to tip it back a little. The little bit of oil that's in there doesn't run out.
And the reason we take this oil plug out is when we're trying to find our positioning on the engine mount plate, this front crossbar gets in the way, and we want to get as much forward position as we can with the motor onto the engine mounting plate. And like Forrest said, there could be some residual oil come out of this hole, so what we're going to do is take an earplug. We're going to go ahead and just twist that thing up, stick that in the hole like that, let it expand. That'll hold the oil in while we're positioning the motor to mark the mounting holes. Is that correct? Okay. All right, we're good. It's in there.
It expanded?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So now,
Okay.
this, yeah.
So when we're marking these holes that are here and there, we want the engine all the way, focus. We want the engine all the way forward against that bar. And if you have the bolt in there, it won't go there. Now the reason that we can put it all the way, against the bar when we're measuring is because we're going to put this engine up on some small spacers. So it will not be sitting in this position when it's running. If you look over here, you can see why we have to put it on spacers, because this bar that slants back interferes with the carburetor. If we had already mounted the Stage 1 carburetor air filter adapter, that would be interfering with this, and so we wouldn't be able to mark the holes properly. So we left that off. We talked about that earlier. We left that off. We're going to do the measurements now, and then once we put the engine up on some small spacers, we do 1/2 inch in the front, 3/4 inch in the rear. Then this will clear, and we'll be good to go.
Yep. All right, so the next thing is once we have the motor inside the frame, we're going to need to put the clutch on. That will enable us to align the clutch with the rear sprocket, so we'll have a nice straight chain path. So this particular centrifugal clutch has a built-in, you probably can't see it, it has a built-in key inside the whatever that's called, to align with.
You can see that.
Can you see it?
Hold on. See the key in there?
All right. Some clutches come with a separate key that you need to slide on and then insert the key into the keyway. Another point is we're going to want to put the teeth on the inside so we can have a little bit of flexibility in the clutch position to make it easier to align with the rear sprocket. All right, so we're gonna attempt to slide this clutch onto this shaft and line the key with the keyway right here, just like that.
Now the clutch comes with some set screws, and I'm a fan of leaving the clutch floating.
Yeah.
Some people will put the set screws in. I like to just put a bolt and washer on the end of the crankshaft.
This is, yeah, I don't think this particular clutch is going to be float like the other ones do. I don't know. This is the first time I've used a clutch like this.
Okay. Okay, so the reason that we put the clutch on before we mark the mounting holes is you've got the crankshaft of the engine, and then you put the clutch on, and the clutch has got the smaller sprocket. We put the sprocket to the inside, and you've got to align that with the large sprocket that's on the rear wheel. You want your chain to run straight between those two. Chain needs to be straight. So not only do they have to both be in the same plane, you've got your front sprocket and you've got your rear sprocket, and they have to be in the same plane. They also have to be at the same angle. If you set your engine up crooked, and that's exaggerated, if you set your engine up crooked like that, it'll pitch the chain off. If you set your engine up like that, and then it's not in line with your sprocket, with your rear sprocket, so your chain's kind of running at an angle, it's going to pitch the chain off. So what you want is you want both the front sprocket and the rear sprocket to be in line with each other and parallel, like that.
All right, we've got the clutch installed. We've got the motor positioned all the way forward
Let me show that up here.
in the
All the way forward. That's why we have the earplug in there. Get us an extra 3/4 of an inch or so.
Yep, and then we're going to use this aluminum channel. We're going to run this back here. We're going to put it on 3 points here on the engine. Right there. And then we're going to align it with so you've got a little bit of a gap between the channel and the teeth on the clutch. So we want to, when we drop this back here, we want to make sure we have a similar gap back here. That looks to be pretty much in alignment and straight to me. So we're going to go ahead and take this out. We're not going to touch the engine. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to mark the holes, the mounting holes on the back and on the front with a Q-tip and some red paint. All right, so take a Q-tip, kind of bend it over at an angle so we can get it in the holes there. Take some red spray paint, spray it generously into a piece of cardboard, a paper plate, whatever you got handy. All right, and then we're gonna roll over here. Get you some red paint on your old Q-tip. And then you're going to go down into these holes and mark the hole position onto the mounting plate. So when you remove the motor, you'll be able to see where you need to drill your holes. We used red because it shows up well on the black paint on the stock mini bikes. Now if you paint your mini bike to another color, then you'll probably have to mark with a different color. Now that we've marked the holes, we can take the motor out of the frame. Now you can see we've got holes marked up front for the front, holes marked for the back. we'll go ahead and we've got a template set up. So we've created this template, or Forrest did. How did you create this?
It's just a copy off the bottom of the engine.
Copy off the bottom of the engine. So we're going to place this on here like this. Line those holes up. The paint like that. So it's kind of like just double checking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should be it, right?
Yep.
We're gonna take our center hole punch. Get it right there in the center. Don't be afraid to pop it a few times. Alright, we've center hole punched our forward mounting holes and our rear mounting holes. So now we're going to put a pilot bit in the drill those out, then load up our step bit and get those big enough to drop 5/16 bolts into. Alright, and we're back. Got the pilot bit in the drill. Gonna go ahead and start drilling out the pilot holes. Alright, pilot holes are drilled. Now we're going to get the step bit, put it in the rattle gun and knock those things out to 5/16. Step bit, got the step bit loaded in. Rattle gun, I'm going to go ahead and just knock these things out. Got the 5/16 bolt here to test the holes so we don't make them too big. Alright, holes are drilled. Now we need to cut some spacers. Alright, so we're back. We're going to cut some spacers out of this, what is this?
3/8 gas line.
3/8 gas line.
Black iron.
Black iron with our chop saw. We're going to cut 2 rear spacers at 3/4 inch and then 2 front spacers at a 1/2 inch. Okay. Put the blue painter's tape on here to be able to mark it very clearly. Forgot my eye protection on that first cut. Spacers cut, we're going to clean those up and then we'll get ready to install the motor. So we've got the rear spacers cut, 3/4 in the back, 1/2 inch in the front. Okay, those are placed over the holes. We've got our calibrated paperback book that we're going to use to help support the engine up on the spacers right there.
That's Restart by Gordon Corman. pick you
Yeah.
up a copy from your local library when you go to build this.
Absolutely. Now, when we go to put the engine back in, we're going to need to remove the earplug and put the oil bolt back in. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it with a 1/2 inch spacer in the front because it's going to be just right above that bar, and you're not going to be able to get a wrench or socket on it.
Okay. So the spacers allow us to not have to cut the bolt off, but you still have to install it before, and it's not something that you'll use. You would use the rearmost drain when performing an oil change.
Correct.
Now, since this drain plug's not accessible, you gotta make sure that you get it snug. You don't want to have a leak.
And again, hold your ratchet here, not down here. Don't want to get it too tight. It is an aluminum block. Just like this.
So Wes pioneered the use of restart as the engine support, because if you try to put this in without some kind of engine support, your spacers get knocked out of alignment, and you end up fighting them. So after multiple trips to the library, he selected that book as the one with the appropriate paperweight and number of pages, and there you have it.
It works really well when you're doing the 3/4 on the front and 1 inch on the back. However, over the course of time, we've shortened the spacer height because of gas cap clearance issues under these bars.
And remember, the Hemi Predator gas tank is taller than the non-Hemi Predator gas tank, so it's even more critical on this particular installation.
All right, so we've got the front bolts in, got them loose. They're on the spacers, rear bolts are in, they're loose. We keep them loose so we can remove the book like this. No trouble with your spacers. Bolts just dropped right in. I don't think we got that on camera, but they did. All right, so those are 5/16
5/16 by 8 or 5/16 18 pitch, 2.5 inches long, front and rear. The front ones you can drop in from the top down. The rear ones, because the cylinder is in the way, you have to put them in from the bottom up. The nut is on the top in the rear. The bolt is on the top in the front.
All right, so now we're gonna grab a 1/2 inch wrench and 1/2 inch socket on the rattle gun and go get these tightened down. Then we'll put the chain on.
So the bolts that we used are grade 5. Sometimes you'll go to the hardware store and you may be tempted to purchase the grade 8 bolts at Tractor Supply. They're really cool. They're gold colored. Stay away from grade 8 on anything that vibrates like this mini bike does. The grade 8 is brittle. It's strong, but it's brittle. And as you're tightening it up, instead of flexing like a grade 5 bolt will, the grade 8 bolt will simply break. So steer clear of the grade 8s, even though they're cool and they're stronger and all of that good stuff. They're not suited for the job that we're doing here. So why are you tightening them down one at a time, and not just hitting all 4 of them in a row?
Because there is a little play in the bolt holes, so I want to check alignment after I snug each one down.
Cool.
Looks
He
good,
doesn't have 4 hands.
and I don't have 4 hands. engine is mounted. It is still lined.
See if we can shoot this sprocket alignment here for you.
Now it's time to put the chain on. So we've got 5 foot of 35 chain. All right, so we got the chain out, and it's already connected. So we're gonna look for the master link like we did when we took off the original chain. I found it right here. So we're gonna use our needle nose pliers and pop that bad boy like that.
That one just came right off.
Yep. Just like that. I'm gonna move.
Now save all those parts because you're going to reuse all of these. And typically, any chain that's a number 35 will work with any master link that's a number 35. It just depends on the quality control of the place that manufactured it.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to run this over the chain tensioner.
You can see that he's routing it the way that it will run when the bike is in use.
So yeah, one of the things is 5 foot of chain is going to be too much chain. So what we want to do,
2 chain.
2 chain. So we're going to measure the length of our chain. So we're going to set it here on top of the sprocket. We're going to route it around the clutch, over the chain tensioner, around the bottom of the sprocket, and get as much slack out as possible. And then we're going to run it up here and see how much chain we need to take out. So we need to take out that link right there. May not need a half link. We'll see. All right, Forrest, why do you ground down the tips of the chain link?
Makes them easier to push out. So we'll push the pin through going the opposite direction, and then we'll have a chain to the correct length.
All right, Forrest, what's this tool called that you're using?
This is a chain breaker. Not sure what brand it is. It says DX on it, and this is 420 to 530. So I think it's a little bit too large for the chain that we're using, but after we grind the tip off of the pin where it's swaged over, it works fine.
It works fine. All right, so now that we've cut our chain to length, we're going to feed it through just like we did before, and hopefully get our master link in.
It's important to note that the whole time we're measuring and doing all of this, we've got the chain tensioner at the most relaxed position. That way if we cut the chain and it's a little long, we can take some slack out.
This always doesn't happen.
This doesn't always happen.
This doesn't always happen to where you can line it up and actually put the master link back in. And it, I may not be able to do it. Sometimes you got to do it with a chain off the sprocket. And I like to feed the master link in from the back so you have access to the little pin on the front here. Put that on. And then if you notice, this key is like a C with a space there.
Hold it flat on your hand. We can't see it when you hold it. Yeah, there we go.
All right. So you want to put the opening towards the rear, because as the chain spins, that way the force is against the back end of the C. You can back off a little bit. Just like that. There is no sense struggling with a master link. Pair of needle nose pliers, all you need. And that chain is a little bit loose. We'll see how it goes. May have to tighten it up here. May have to take another link out and put a half link in. We'll just have to see. But that'll be it'll be good to test it and run it. I think that chain will be a little loose, but we'll see. Action.
All right. Okay, so Wes went ahead and installed the engine on the spacers, and we talked earlier about why we didn't install the air filter adapter while we were measuring the holes. And if you look right here, you can see that once we get the engine installed on the spacers, there's plenty of room here. So we'll go ahead, we'll remove these nuts, find that one later.
Whose nuts?
These nuts. Yeah, we'll find that one. Okay.
Found it.
Cool.
Right there.
Oh, there it is. So these are the parts that we're going to use. We will install this air filter adapter. It's got some letters. The letters go
Down.
no, they go right side up on the bottom side of the circle.
Down.
Well, okay. So they go on like this. There's a metal gasket here. Make sure that you've got that in place. And when you put this on, you'll notice that one, there's a little threaded hole here. The assembly came with this bracket and a bolt. And the second thing that you'll notice is that there's nothing holding this choke lever on. So, like no shit, that's what the little extra bracket's for. Put that back on there. You'll want to not put the nuts on. And we'll start out here installing the bolt through the bracket. Okay, so it'll sit about like that. When you go to put it on, you want to adjust it so that this bracket sits on top of that. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to touch it, because in order for this to come off, in order for the choke arm to come off, it has to come up almost 1/2 inch. So it doesn't have to touch it, but the closer you get it, the better off you are. I like to put a drop of Loctite on the small screw and then adjust it down to where it just barely slides over the top of the choke arm. I'll do that now. Okay, so we've got the bracket on. All I did was put some Loctite on there, get the bolts nice and tight, slide it over.
What's the good word? What's the German word for that?
Gudentite. And but actually, I think Gudentite requires the use of a ratchet, and you have to make the sound. And then put these two nuts on there. These use a 10mm socket to tighten them up. You need to tighten them evenly. Don't crank one down and then crank the other one down, or you won't be able to get them on there. As you tighten them down, you're compressing the rubber that's on the metal gasket plate that we saw earlier. So make sure that you tighten them evenly. and get them. You want to make sure that you get them tightened down all the way so that you are compressing this gasket. Otherwise, you're going to have a leak here, and you're going to be sucking in dirt. If you have a leak here, the carburetor body could move forward and create another leak here, and then you're sucking in unmetered and unfiltered air, which is going to cause your bike to run lean. So put it on there, use a 10mm socket, and get those snugged up. Okay, so we've got the air filter adapter on there. We tightened down the 10mm nuts. We tightened down those evenly so that they pull the carburetor in. And then next up, we're going to put this air filter on. There's a couple things. I like to put the air filter on with it angled back like that. And I also like to have the hose clamp where the screw is on the bottom so that it's easily accessible with a screwdriver from the front, but it's still hidden when somebody's standing looking at your bike. So that right there is the orientation that I like to install the air filter. Tighten that down. And remember, you don't have to go crazy with this. Those are real thin strips of metal on the hose clamp that you're tightening. So get it on there, get it snug so that it doesn't fall off. Pull on a little. All right, good to go. So we've got the choke bracket that holds the choke in place, the choke lever in place. This is the fuel selector. To the rear is off, that's fuel off. To the forward is on. And this is all completed. So we've got the air filter assembly done. As we move forward on the bike, we're going to need to hook up the throttle cable. We're going to need to clock the recoil starter, and we need to hook up the cutoff switch. The recoil starter right now is set up to be pulled forward. You can take out these 3 bolts that are here, rotate this 60 degrees or so, and make it to where your recoil starter comes out right here. It's much easier to start when you're standing over the bike or sitting on the bike even. So that's worth doing. You peel this sticker off because you don't want to have it looking wrong. So we'll do those things right now. We're gonna get it's a 8mm, and pull that off and clock it. And then we'll show you the electrical hookups. 2 connections, very easy. And then we'll do the throttle routing. The throttle cable is gonna involve us removing the seat. We come from the throttle cable, down through the forks, up through the frame up here, over the top of the gas tank. You avoid the muffler and come back around, and we go right into this connection here and hook the throttle up. Stay tuned, you're going to see how we do this. Uses the stock length cable, so no issues there. Tightening that bolt into threaded sheet metal, so don't go nuts with it. Probably don't use a rattle gun. Look at this. It's to the back now. I think we rotated it more than 60 degrees, but that's okay. To the back now, much easier to start. Everything's good. While we've got the 8mm on the rattle gun, let's go ahead and take a look at the kill switch that's on the handlebar. So earlier in one of the videos, when we removed the governor, we talked about removing the low oil shutoff sensor. And this is where the box for that sensor was mounted. And so we will reuse this bolt. There we go. We'll reuse this bolt. That'll provide the ground,
And then this butt connector that we removed for the low oil sensor shutoff happens to just fit right into the one on the Monster Moto 80. And so then your switches both work. So if both switches are on, then the engine will run. If either switch is off, then the engine will be off. So when you're getting ready to start your motor, make sure you've got this switch on and this switch up here on the handlebars. You want them both to be on. And if in the event you want to turn the engine off, this switch will turn the engine off, or the switch down here. Both of them will work to kill it. I'll fish this 8mm in through there and see if I can tighten it up a little. And then we will start talking about throttle cable mounting. That's nice and tight. And we talked earlier about retaining this black plastic clip. We'll take all of these wires. We're going to clean this up with zip ties later. But we'll take all of these wires. We'll make a nice neat bundle. Put them inside the clip. And put them out of the way. You don't have to worry about it at that point. All right, let me grab some dikes and we will start routing the throttle cable. This is throttle cable. We'll start routing it up. We're gonna have to cut, I believe, 2 more zip ties, and we'll head back underneath the seat over the top. The seat on the Monster Moto is held on by 2 Phillips head screws. See them there?
Maybe.
From my experience, the Monster Moto 105s have Allen head screws in the seat. Not sure the reason for the difference, but that's what I've observed. So take those 2 screws out, set them aside because you're going to put the seat back on. And then to take the seat off, just slide it backwards, lift up, and you're done. It's easy access.
Always have some plastic melted to the...
Yep. All right, so we're talking about throttle cable routing and how it's going to come up here. We're going to use some zip ties to hold it. We also have to take into account the exhaust. The exhaust is going to come here, come up, and then exit center over the rear tire. So at this point, you can either put your exhaust on, or you can route your cable up and not zip tie it, then put your exhaust on and zip tie it. So we'll go ahead and put the exhaust on first, just to make life easier. Keep in mind here that you are building a mini bike. Don't take life too seriously. Have fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth it. It's a mini bike. There are several different options you can use when installing the 13mm nuts onto the engine here to lock them down. First thing you can do, you could put Loctite on them, but Loctite is easily released by heat. This is going to get hot. Second thing you could do is use a split washer to provide some tension there. I don't believe in those. I don't think they work. And then the last thing that you can do is my preferred method. Let's come back and check that and tighten it up every now and then. Get them nice and tight. Notice that the exhaust comes up here. This spot right here happens to be where your pants or shorts hang when your leg sits up here. So go ahead and invest in some exhaust strap or the exhaust sleeve that Go Power Sports sells. There's some other companies that sell them, but it's worth it to have one. Otherwise, you're going to burn your gym shorts up or set your pants on fire. All right, so with the exhaust in place, next thing we need to worry about is routing the last thing we need to do is route the throttle cable. Again, we'll come back and clean all of this up and make sure that we have everything zip tied up appropriately. You don't want your cables dangling. You certainly don't want your cables dragging. Let's see, one more hidden one there. All right, so we cut those zip ties off, and that frees this throttle cable up. If you take it and put it through the frame, under the seat brace, and then curve it around, it is the correct length. The correct length to install in this Predator throttle connection. Okay, so I was talking about routing it clear of your exhaust. If you lay it over too far like this, you can have your exhaust melt this, it'll burn it, and then it won't work. So what you want to make sure is that you've got it turned up pretty high to where it's going to route up against the bottom of the seat and then around over the top of the gas tank, and we'll secure all of that with zip ties. Tighten it down. Check with the throttle cable to make sure that the wire still moves freely. No issues there. And then we're going to take this throttle cable and thread it right through here. In order to get that loose, we need some needle nose pliers to hold it. Loosen it right up. You do not need to remove the screw all the way. That's just asking for trouble. That's asking for losing the screw. And put that throttle cable all the way through. Twist the throttle grip. Manually twist the throttle grip as far forward as it will go. It's going to take the slack out here. Then pull the cable down here. You want that to be nice and tight. Use some pliers, pull it tight while you've got a little bit of tension on it. Snug the screw in. Now the screw is secured to the cable. Check the throttle. A couple things that you want to check for. You want to make sure that you get it to go to full throttle. You can look at the black plastic arm here to make sure that it's going to full throttle. And it is. Going to full throttle. And then also you're going to want to add the spring to the governor arm to make sure that you're getting positive return on your throttle. You want to make sure that you're bringing that all the way back. Throttle linkage is hooked up. So what we just did in this section, we installed the air filter adapter. We installed the choke bracket that retains the choke arm right there. We clocked the recoil starter so that you can start it from over the top of the bike or sitting on the bike. We went to the front, we connected the electrical system. Notice we didn't do any cuts. We didn't cut any wires to do that. We used the existing butt connectors. We put the connectors on, we put the ground wire on from the Monster Moto handlebar switch. So that's all wired up. And then we cut some zip ties, rerouted the throttle cable up over the top, and hooked it up to the Predator 212. Once we install the seat, put some gas in this, put some oil in it, takes half a quart of oil, put some gas and some oil in it. This Monster Moto 80 is a 212 convert and it's ready to ride. I like to peel the stickers off, take the stickers off of the engine, clean up all the wiring with zip ties to make it look nice and neat and go, but essentially all of the mechanical work is done at this point.
All right, we've buttoned up the 212 Predator conversion on the Monster Moto 80. Right quick. We've got the fender on, which one thing you want to notice is depending on the type of exhaust or header you choose, you may have some clearance issues with the fender. You may have to trim it. You may have to adjust or bend your header, whatever you choose. This one's going to touch a little bit, so we may have to go and exchange that out for a different header. Right now we're going to go ahead and slap some oil in it, some gas, and fire it up to show you that it runs. And you know, we just wanted to share our method. We found this, I mean, there's a million ways to do this. This is just a very simple, straightforward way that we found the easiest path to getting it done. It works great. We've done, how many have we helped? We've built and helped build how many in the neighborhood?
We altogether there's 65 of these bikes in the neighborhood, and the majority of the conversions Wes and I have been involved in. So they're converted to 212s.
They all work fine. They work great. And we
know some tips and tricks. If you put one together and you start having troubles, leave a comment and say, hey, this is what my bike's doing. Make sure that you tell the whole story, make it easy to understand, and tell us what it's doing, and we'll give you some feedback. Likewise, if you have a tip or trick that makes this work better, leave us a comment. We would appreciate the feedback, and viewers of the video can benefit from your experience too.
Absolutely. We appreciate you tuning in. Smash that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you next time.